I was listening to your first episode actually this morning on my way to the office, a way back just to kind of get into the
Wow.
and
Did you
I was
listen
I was
to
curious,
our reaction to it or the actually first episode?
no, like the very tanning beds and nudes and like the whole like way back. And I and I wanted to kind of get your take on from that first episode to now. What have you had to evolve personally to get here?
Oh
I think
man.
I'm working on not feeling embarrassed of that version of me. I'm working on like loving her. So just that. Um, but I think it's the business and what we do has been such a work of reflection, a work of introspection, a work of being intentional, and a work of looking at ourselves and how we show up in the world. I think we both realized, Lindsey and I, with our business, that it everything that is reflected back to us in our business is something that is going on internally. So if we have potentially blocks around money, we won't be seeing money in abundance in our business. If we have potentially blocks around being seen or expressing our truth, we will feel that reflected back to us through our business or through the response from our audience. And, having a podcast, we have around 500 episodes, and that's thousands of hours of content and us expressing in the world and us talking. So there is a lot of opportunity for us to really like be like, okay, is this how I want to show up? Because each podcast is really an ability for you to just check in on, am I listening enough? Am I asking the right questions? Do I sound clear? Am I concise? Am I speaking from the heart? Does this feel natural? You can really do a lot of growth in listening to yourself talk on a podcast. So we've been lucky that it's been such a powerful way for us to check in each and every week on who we are, how we're showing up, if it's who we want to be showing up as, is there any opportunity for us to grow, and then work on whatever changes we want to work on with our coaches, with our therapists, or together. But when you are an entrepreneur, when you're working on something that you really love, I think there's a lot that can be shown for you. So it's been powerful. I mean, we've changed every year or so. We just continue to evolve and grow. I mean, I can't, even the person who I was a year ago, I'm like, oh my gosh, who was that person? But I think that's how I've always wanted to live my life. I've always wanted to evolve, change, and grow, and just continue to take new information in and apply whatever new principles or ideas or perspectives that I have in my life, which is something that feels really natural to me.
And I feel like as time has gone on, I've had more patience with me in the present moment. I think we can look back and be like, ooh, but I think because we have this record of like at least the last 6 years of our evolution, it's like knowing how much we've changed. I know that in a year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, like I'm going to change even more. And so it's really made me so much more present to who I am now. I have much more compassion and grace for who I am now, what seems hard right now, because that thing that seems hard right now might not be that hard in a short period of time. Um, and it's just taught me so much about like what it takes. It's not about skipping steps. It's not about numbing through the hard times. It's not about doing things alone. It's not about suffering through things. I think what Almost 30 has shown me is like we like literally can't do this alone, whether it's me leaning on Krista, her leaning on me, us connecting in community. It's really made the growth that much more enjoyable and that much more fulfilling.
Oh, so much there. Thanks. Great dive into it. And I think, well, I mentioned earlier before we started recording, but congratulations are definitely in order for you, Lindsey, around a huge change. So congrats on your engagement, first of all.
Thank you.
And I think along the same vein, I'm curious in regards to that, your relationship, what would you tell, 5 years ago, or even starting the pod, what would you tell that Lindsey in terms of relationships and engagement? Because when you guys started, right, it was like dating and a different space there. So just
Yes.
wanted to reflect for a second on that too.
Yeah. Krista and I are planning on doing another like episode where we listen to an old episode, and I'm like getting more nervous because I know I definitely shared some like wacky stories about dating. Um, yeah, I mean, I think like 5, 6 years ago, I still hadn't really set a standard for myself in relationship or even casually dating on like the level of how much respect I deserved. And I think respect is like such a big word. And I think there can be like blatant forms of disrespect, but then there's like mostly what I experienced, which is kind of like this sneaky, disrespectful behavior that can happen in more casual relationships. And I think I was really like living one big mixed message when it came to dating. You know, in my heart, I wanted one thing, but what I was saying and pursuing was something completely different. And so, what I would tell myself back then is just, can you take a little bit more time with yourself to truly understand and on a like cellular level believe and feel how you want to be treated, how you would like to show up in relationship? Because I think I was operating out of please hurry up, out of desperation. I just want to find someone. I just want to be in a relationship. Um, and I was pursuing things that were like very misaligned.
Wow, I love that. Even on a cellular level, it's like believing it so deeply in your core, because we don't, at least for me, I don't always realize how I'm showing up. Like I don't know in the moment, right? Those little habits or things, I don't realize what they really mean on a subconscious level. So it's, wow, that means a lot. Um, my head's already going now to you, Krista, just around the women's health journey. I mean, a lot of what I've been working on is in the just reproductive women's health, fertility side of things. And so I'm also curious, maybe sort of the same question for you, but in regards to this whole sort of reproductive health journey that you're going on. I mean, what would you tell yourself there in terms of 5 years ago where you were at, knowing what you know now?
Mhm. Yeah, so this question begins probably, or the answer to this question begins. I was put on birth control when I was 14. I was sexually active then, which breaks my heart to think about, but I was. And so I just was put on birth control as a way to prevent pregnancy. And then it was kind of like business as usual. We just moved on. But I didn't realize, and I know now how much it impacted my mood, it impacted my personality. And I just felt a lot of the mental health issues that I had and I grew up with and I still, work on today, but not as much. So I think were exacerbated by the impact of birth control on me and the hormones effects on, who I was. So I was on birth control probably till I was like 20. I was on a certain birth control and then I switched in my 20s and it got even worse where I just felt completely out of control. I felt like I completely lost sense of who I was. And then when I was 26, I was living in Chicago and I was like, I think I'm done with this. No one that I knew was off birth control. Every single person that I was friends with or knew was on birth control. It was kind of like a thing. Like it was a very social thing where you'd have the alarm on your phone to remind you to take your birth control. And everyone would be like, reminder, take your birth control. We'd all be on birth control. And so when I decided to get off um, hormonal birth control and get the Paragard IUD, which is a copper IUD that is non-hormonal that sits inside you, basically. I immediately felt so much better. I felt like a veil had been lifted just switching from hormonal to non-hormonal, and my life just totally changed. And I was like, wow, I really am so heartbroken that this is such a powerful drug that everyone is really being medicated just very casually. So it became something that I felt really passionately about. It had changed my life. And I had that in for about 8 years. It was great, totally fine. I did have my own hormone journey outside of it that was related to adrenal fatigue, pushing my body too much. That was related to a high estrogen level, a low progesterone level, which just caused a myriad of symptoms that I had to go on and heal my hormones naturally outside of my non-hormonal birth control. And that was something that was also incredibly powerful for me to just like learn about my body and see how different things impacted me, whether it was stress or sleep or sugar or fats in my diet or my workouts. And just really to be reminded that, we so often pick apart these parts of our lives where we're like, okay, I'm going to dial back the carbs to lose weight, but then we don't realize that that could negatively impact our hormones. Or we're like, I'm going to work out more because I want to look this way, but then we don't realize that our hormones don't always want to be working out so hard all the time. So our body is this like beautiful thing that exists as one, and we sometimes try and take it apart often with all these other things. And that's even with birth control, where you're trying to just stop yourself from being pregnant, but you don't realize it's impacting all areas of your life. So I learned a lot about my body in that journey where I healed my hormones naturally, which I've talked about on the pod. And I feel really good about that now. But I recently got my copper IUD taken out. So I had that taken out on Monday. And my overall intention was just to continue to move closer to closer to continue to move closer to closer and closer to the most natural state of my body that I could be in. That's not going to be perfect. And I definitely, will continue to eat things and do things that might not be natural all the time, but it just felt right after having it in for 8 years. I had high copper levels when I got tested. And I think that was due to my copper IUD. And it just felt like it was time. So I got it taken out Monday, which I thought would hurt really bad. It was really, really easy and simple. But I also was like, very much just being so grateful for my IUD. I was like, oh, I'm so grateful for you. You've done such a great job at preventing pregnancy for me. Our time is complete. Thank you so much. And I loved that practice that I brought into it because I feel like it reminded me of how these little things in our life, like we don't realize that this thing has been a part of me for 8 years. It's a foreign object, but it's been a part of me for 8 years, and it's done its job. It's done an amazing thing. So like making your life more like a ceremony. And so bringing these like elements of ceremony into your life are also really beautiful, but I feel really, really good. I don't feel that different. I feel a little bloated and I spotted a little bit, but otherwise I feel really good. And I'm really glad I did it.
Wow. Yeah. I somehow draw parallels between I know they're very different things that you're going through right now in that sense, but I find parallels because to me, there's something of boundaries or learning your boundaries. Like Lindsey, you talked about that with sort of respect, but Krista, for you, it's sort of like just coming back home completely, or kind of, it's this interesting thing that I find myself learning as I continue to sort of evolve in my career and I guess leadership, but more just as myself. It's like finding what my natural boundaries are. What am I okay with? What's okay? What's not okay? And in both of those, I know they're different, but in both of those, I really hear that from the two of you, just getting really clear. There's so much feminine power in what you're both saying of like, I know what I want, that clarity of I know what I want, I know what I deserve. And I've definitely struggled with that for a very long time of like, what's okay with me and what am I just allowing to happen because I don't think about if I'm all right with it or not. I don't know if that.
It does. I get it too. And it's also like the unconscious self. So like my unconscious self was like, okay, I'll take birth control. All is well. We'll see. And Lindsey, with relationship, it's just like unconsciously accepting things that now she knows she wouldn't accept. I was unconsciously accepting this thing that I would never accept now. And it's just like a part of our life where we, learn from the decisions we make. We accept what seems to be normal. And then we sort of awaken and realize that like, oh, I can do better in relationship, or, oh, I can do better for my body. And it's, never shaming yourself for the decisions that you made at the time, but it's always like just being curious and hopefully coming back home to yourself and what feels really aligned for you in your life and the way that you want to live it.
Yeah. How do we, maybe a big question, but how do we do that? I mean, you mentioned coaches and therapists and sort of reflecting and looking back, but I find anyone that's really evolved in their business and in leadership somehow has that really together in some way. The two seem linked. I'm not entirely sure. Like they're far more conscious about their boundaries, what they're okay with, what they want. I find that leaders that have really achieved certain levels of success, whatever they're up to, but they're far more conscious about the things that are important to them. How do you do that on a daily basis and presence yourselves? Because it's one thing to have a vision board or to write a list of values and kind of do it once every whatever, and it's another thing to actually live that day to day.
Yeah, I think this is such a good question. And I think for Krista and I, it's been very much like trial and error, where like the boundaries have been crossed, and then we're like, whoa, okay, a boundary should exist there. But I also think it requires, I think it requires pattern recognition, where it's like, okay, so this thing keeps happening. This feeling I keep having, or this, yeah, this challenge or problem keeps coming up, if we're going to talk specifically like within business. And so thankfully, Kristen and I have each other. And oftentimes, especially in the last few years after having therapy and coaches, we naturally come together and we're like, so this thing keeps happening. And what is this showing us? What is this here to teach us? Is this a lesson? Is this something that we have been allowing for more than we should, more time than we should? And so in those conversations and just slowing down and actually giving space to this feeling, we're able to really parse out like, okay, this is specifically the pattern. And so we're able to kind of take a moment, take a step back, and then make a new choice from there. And I think this can be applied to just, any part of anyone's life. It's like, can you slow down enough to take a step back, kind of have like more of an aerial view of like, this happened last month too. Or, it seems that anytime I'm in a relationship, I feel this way. What's actually happening here? And oftentimes journaling can be a really, really good way. I know journaling is like hit or miss with people as far as enjoying it, but I do find that putting pen to paper and getting the words and thoughts in our heads out onto paper will show us something that we couldn't grab while it was ping-ponging in our mind. So I highly recommend just taking time to get in a meditative state and then putting pen to paper and just kind of stream of consciousness, what's on your heart, what's coming up, and you'll often find a pattern and a clarity.
Nice. Yeah. I have a hard time with the writing part. Like my cousin who actually introduced me to your podcast, she loves it. Like she's got a notebook. It's a very almost like a spiritual thing. Like she'll go and she's got her safe space and it's so sacred to her. And for me, I really like that you talk about voice notes actually, because I'm such a talker. So for me, I could talk about something for 30 minutes if it's on my mind. So I find that, which also I got from you guys, I think that's awesome because it's more my style, but it does let me kind of think it out and tell a story, have a narrative. Like I find a narrative helps me, right? Kind of what's my story. Jordan Peterson does it with his future authoring program. It's like to have a real narrative about your life. Like you guys have, your 30s or your 20s and kind of really be clear about what your growth has been. I think for me, it helps because then I know, okay, here's where I've been, here's where I am right now. Where do I want to go? It makes it really cohesive for me. Otherwise, day to day sometimes can be challenging to know what's important. Day to day, it can really fly by, and then a year goes by. It's like, how did I end up here?
Yeah, I think that's just consciousness too. It's like when you're just like, okay, where did a year go? It's like you haven't been conscious to the decisions you're making and like back to presence of, okay, what is today? Who am I? What am I doing? Why am I doing it? What is my future? And always like coming back to the present so you can really be mindful about the decisions that you're making for the future. And I think when you are present, and that's what I realized too, is like my boundaries are easy when I'm present. It's when I kind of lose myself or I disassociate when I'm like, oh yeah, that's fine. Or yeah, let's do that. Or, I just say, I kind of catch myself in the moment of like wanting to appease people or wanting to like be in the energy of saying yes to someone or something. But if I am like grounded in who I am and what I need, it's like taking that second. It's like, how does that sit with me? Do I want to be doing that? And then you can hear your voice that says yes or no. You can check in. But I noticed that too with leaders that we work with or are friends with. Susie Batiz of Poopery, who's someone that we love and we've interviewed a few times. I'll never forget when we first met her, we asked her to do something, or I don't know if it was someone else that asked her to do something. And she was like she literally paused and was like, I'm going to have to get back to you on that. And I was like, whoa. I thought it was so cool that she like took a second and was like, I need more time to actually think about it, and gave herself the grace and had the respect for herself and her future self enough to be like, I need to think about that. And I think so often we're like, yes, that's fine. We just kind of go in this world of like yesing, but then having our boundaries be violated a little bit, and just respecting yourself enough to give yourself space in your day, space in your reply, space in thinking about what you want for your future, and then like taking the action on it. So I think what you're saying is so normal. And I think so many of us get caught up in it. And it's like so natural to just kind of lose ourselves in unconscious living. But we really see the reward when we're like making that concerted intention.
Yeah, for sure. What helps you guys slow down? I know you mentioned journaling, but is there something is there a daily ritual? What are you doing that you find is really supportive in making that space?
I find that the pace of the morning really sets the pace for the rest of the day. So we hear it a lot, right? It's like, what's your morning routine? But I think the most important thing that I can do for myself is not rush out of bed and rush into something, whether it's on my phone or even rush to a workout. It's like, can I give myself that slower pace and that moment to moment morning thing, to really feel into like, okay, how do I feel today? Am I bringing anything from yesterday to this day that I don't need? What do I need? Do I need water? Do I need a certain type of food? What do I need today in general? Do I need a little bit more nature today? Do I need to talk to a friend today? And I think those first, I would say like 20 minutes of the day, if you can slow down, maybe even lay in bed a little bit longer, like stretch in bed, maybe just be cozy, look out the window, let the sun come in the window and shine on you. Like all these like seemingly cheesy things can actually bring you to presence because you're taking it all in. And I think just those first 20 minutes can really set the pace so you don't feel like you have to be like on one all day.
Yeah, for sure. I can almost think back to childhood, right? It's like your parents waking you up. It's like, it's time for school. And you just like, I can feel the kind of like nerves of my mom being like, I gotta go. And it's like,
Dude,
I feel that.
I was like, dude, I used to be like, it was like a jolt. You were like, like
I know.
my mom used to just come in and we had those like wooden blinds, and she would just go, and the blinds would go ting 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 ting. And I'll be like, it would be so early. But then I started then I got my own alarm. I was like, I can't be doing this anymore. But we had school. Our school started at 7:15. I don't know what time
early.
You guys, it should be illegal. Honestly, it should be truly illegal. So I was getting up at 6. And I left for school at like 6:45. Like, I was like 12.
And we're like shoveling in like our toaster strudels. We're like,
I was eating like a whole box of cereal. I'm like, I gotta go. I have to eat my grains before school. Like it was horrifying, but yes,
I would watch the Today Show in the morning.
Wow.
I had to watch all the news. And now not a lick.
You're literally 14. You're like, oh man, the stock's going down. Like, what are you?
Like, what was, I don't know. I have no
idea. It's funny because you're just really watching your parents kind of, and you're like, this is what people do.
Yes.
It's crazy to me. Last thing, it's like, I see a bunch of kids and students drinking coffee now.
Mm-hmm.
In that they all drink coffee.
It's weird.
Very.
Oh, even just it's a thing. We didn't have it in our school, but even all the vending machines with all the, I mean, Coke or Pepsi, like they have caffeine too, right? And it's such a thing in
Yes.
high schools.
Yeah.
Oh man, that's a whole
I
other
know.
road. The food road. I don't know where we can go with that. What do you guys? Oh, that's been such a journey for me too. Just around like reading ingredients is so hard. I feel like you have to have a degree. Like even if you go into like Whole Foods or something like that, where you think it's like, oh, this is such a natural space. It's like, no, it's not. You still have to read so carefully. I don't know. Is there anything there that you guys have to say? Because for me, I find that like sometimes it's exhausting or overwhelming to look at it, and I'm trying to just eat foods that I like. This is an apple, or this is a, this
Yes.
is beef. Like I'm just literally, I've gone to that very simplistic space because I was getting super overwhelmed with that whole space.
Lindsay's the goat for this one.
I yeah, I mean I totally relate where I feel like I'm looking at like an ingredient list of something I'm eating every day and I'm like, "Oh shoot, canola oil? Like what the hell?" You know, it's like it can be maddening, you know? So, what do I want to say with this? I think you're right. I think like Whole Foods are obviously like what I will always have a preference for. You know, and as we learn about what organic means, we have to be even careful about like the type of organic that we're eating because it's not always doesn't always mean it's super super clean. And so I try not to stress because any stress that I have around food, I notice that like my body in stress does not process food well. So whether it like gives me a stomach ache or I get constipated or it's just one of those things. So I try not to stress about it, but I do enjoy learning, you know? So if you have resources like, I mean, there's so many people out there now that are experts. Kelly LeVeque is one of my favorites because she's just incredibly real, you know? She's not telling you to like grow all your apples in your backyard. That's the only way to do it. Like she's just very practical. Um and I love her insight. I love the science and she usually drops gems that I never forget. And that's kind of how I learn where I'll forget a lot of things, but if it's important to me, like I'll never ever forget it. So when you know when anyone's telling me like the bad oils and things, I'm always just kind of like on the lookout. And I think that's all we can do, right? If things are important to you and you are mindful of them, I think it will work out in your favor if you're eating mostly healthy. Um, but if you want to do a real deep dive, I'm sure you listened to our episode with Dr. Zach Bush. You know, our food supply, especially agriculturally, has completely changed since I think it was the 40s or 50s. And so, yeah, it's kind of scary, and so we have to be incredibly mindful of the soil from which our food is coming from because it's been completely sterilized and doesn't hold the nutrients that it once did. So, yeah, that's something I'm just kind of thinking about now. Like, where is like my produce coming from and making sure it's as clean and full of nutrients as possible.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. The more I go down the rabbit hole, it's like all of the like bio and fulvic, humic and fulvic, these mineral supplements, because the minerals are so depleted. There's this whole thing. There's around essentially getting all of these minerals that are the building blocks of most foods because of what you just said. So that's kind of where my rabbit hole in that arena has been going down, is replenishing those minerals because that's what we're sort of depleted in. That's as far
You
as
can get mineralized water drops. There's the BLK has those fulvic, and Alexis, or her name is Alex Cousins. She talks a lot about this like supplement that's like the fulvic minerals so that we can have mineralized blood and mineralized food. But just unfortunate because it's like if our food was being cooked in the right way or being grown in the right way, or even animals were being treated the right way in the process of like our consumption of them, we wouldn't have to worry so much about it. But I just try and go and look at things and I'm like, what is this? You know, if you look at something, you're like, what is this? This is an apple. Got it. Like if you look at it and you know what it is, That's like, I think sometimes the goal, like you have to
Yes.
look at it and you don't know what it is or what's in it, or if it's been created in some lab. I think that's where it gets a little funky. I don't think perfection is the goal, but I do think that when we're consuming things that are super processed, it's like, I just feel bad for our body sometimes because, it's already doing so much for us. I'm sure it's not the ideal thing to be feeding it.
Hmm.
Yeah, I like the simplicity kind of standard there. I think it's been working for me so far, and just not having it be a stressful thing, because that's not how I want to feel either when I'm eating. So if I can go back to, I'm finding that's my theme for everything lately though right now, is just kind of how can I make this simple? What feels good and what's simple, what's easy, what's filled with ease, not even just easy, but ease filled. I don't know how to,
I love that.
but
Yeah.
and you guys earlier mentioned also nature as a piece. I know, Krista, I was just looking at you going for, you had something going for a walk, or it was just so pretty by the water.
Mhm.
But what's the role of getting ourselves in nature? Because I feel like everyone now, it's like, go for a walk, like get your natural vitamin D. What's beyond that? Because there's definitely a spiritual thing, right? I think there's something so sacred about being amongst trees or by water. For me, water is so healing. So
Mm.
what do you what do you notice there?
Nature is literally life, like the rest is just details. And I think the more on my spiritual path that I realized that, like, all things come back to nature, all things come back to meditation, all things come back to quiet. And when we think about our organic reality, which is the plants, the trees, the water, and we think about our inorganic reality, which is, social media, buildings, cars, all these things, it's like, what makes us feel good? What brings us peace? More so our organic reality versus our inorganic reality. And I'm someone that living in California has been such a dream. I was in Chicago and New York City before, and it's been so beautiful. But as I become closer to, like, God, the closer I want to come to nature, because God exists in plants, God exists in trees, and He exists in all of us. But it's like that really beautiful experience of looking at a flower and you're like, what the heck? How does this exist? This perfectly shaped sacred geometry existence that grew up out of the ground in this weird circumstance between the crack of this street, and still brings so much beauty into the world. And I think when I find myself in nature more, I feel better about my body. I feel better about my relationships. I feel more spiritual. And I can tell if I've, like, been around the computer too much or been inside too much or haven't got outside. The effects of working out are increased when you're in the sun. The effects of your happiness are better when we're outside. We feel less stressed. We feel less inflamed. We feel a deeper sense of peace. It has so many health benefits too, on, like, our physical well-being, our mental well-being, and our spiritual well-being. And so when we can do things that give us all of those benefits that we really enjoy, there's just nothing better.
Oh, agreed. That's actually, I think, my biggest challenge is I feel like my whole career that I've built is completely glued to this device. And so, and I'm in this really, sometimes I feel like I'm in this battle with myself of like, if I want to work, if I want to build this podcast, if I want to get ahead, then I've got to do the exact opposite of what my body is wanting. And that kind of divide, I mean, talk about earlier with the boundaries and everything. Like sometimes it's just like, I want to go a week or 2 weeks. Like I don't want to be
Mhm.
in the feeling of technology.
Yeah.
So how, I mean,
Yes.
sure, your business definitely asks of you to be online. So what's the deal with boundaries there? Because
Mhm.
I have not figured that out fully for myself. It's either I feel like I'm so extreme, like I'm either fully in my business and online all the time, and maybe I'll get one walk in, but it's not the balance that I think I need personally. So,
Yeah, it's so hard. I mean, even yesterday, I hit a point because we were on just so many calls the last couple days,
Yeah.
just on our computers, and I just hit a point where all of a sudden I became like so unreasonably exhausted, and it felt like a different exhaustion. It was like the life had been sucked out of me. I was like, whoa. And and I really think that all of us experience that and we don't even realize it, that our fatigue is coming from being on and in front of screens all the time and not being in real life with people or looking out into the horizon or being amongst trees. And so I think it's just so important that we do our best to batch, this work that we're doing in front of the screens. Krista and I really try to do that, where we are not running ourselves into the ground and trying to just stack call upon call and meeting upon meeting. We do give ourselves literal calendar space of like white space, and sometimes we'll be like taking a walk, and that becomes an appointment. That becomes something that we are committed to doing, and we want to like normalize that for ourselves and for our team, because I know that I'm no good if I have been in front of the computer all day. I'm not going to be productive, and I'm not going to be productive in a way that I'm creating something that I'm proud of. But I know it's hard. It's easier said than done. We are very lucky. Krista and I own our own business. We work from home. We can kind of make our own rules. So when you're working for someone else or a part of a bigger company, it's almost like the culture has to change.
Mm-hmm.
Well, which starts, I mean, it can start grassroots, ground up, but I find a lot of the time it does start with leadership, right? It does start with the leadership of a company saying, okay, this is really important to us. We want everyone to live this, have this freedom. So yeah, which leaders would you say really inspire you? Because I think you're both leading in such a heart-centered and authentic way, and it is hard these days to do that and not just focus on growing your business solely. And I love how you guys are so heart-centered. So who inspires you in the leadership realm, in the business realm?
I feel like we've been inspired. I remember Marie Forleo came on maybe a year or so ago, and she was talking about how within her business, they do 2 weeks of the office being closed. So people have their normal PTO or their normal time off, but then they shut down the company for 2 weeks of the year. And Lindsey and I did that right away. We're like, could we do that? We're like, let's do that. So we actually did 3 weeks this year. We're kind of creeping up. We're just going to keep doing more and more time. But I remember hearing that and feeling so inspired that like you could feel confident enough in your business to be like, okay, we're going to take time off and we're going to, go away and do a thing. And then we work with a company, we invest in a company called House of Wise, and they're a CBD company, like female founded. They're really, really amazing. And they do 4-day work weeks. And I was just thinking recently, I'm like, I'm so inspired by them doing 4-day work weeks. And I'm just so like excited that I see so many of our friends and people that we work with making flexible hours. They'll travel and they'll work, and they'll do things like 4-day work weeks, and they'll do things like take weeks off at a time. So I feel like you can find the inspiration when you seek it. And it's really just like continuing to move closer and closer to what feels like a good balance within your life as much as you can. But as far as like who really inspires us, I think Susie Batiste is one of those. Again, Poopery. She's just so creative and heart-centered, and she moves the business on a whim, and she moves the business when she has a plant ceremony where Mother Ayahuasca told her to do something else in business that she wasn't doing. And she really just listens to her heart. So we are inspired by people that listen to their heart, that choose their purpose over profit, that choose to just really walk the walk of what they're doing and why they're doing it. And I feel grateful that we can be leaders, because I've always felt like I had a vision, or I've always felt like there was a lot of things within the corporate world that I felt so sick by, that I'm excited that I can create like a new type of working structure or environment that isn't perfect at all. I think we could be better and better, but that moves along the path of being more integrated and organic than what the normal structure currently is in the States.
Yeah. Do you guys see that changing? I feel a shift really, at least, I mean, I'm working with mainly female entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs. So for me, I guess I'm in the space a lot where people are doing wacky things with their work schedule. Like I know there's a lady who will run only 2 events a year to fill her group programs. And she literally 4 months a year, she's just off. She's like, and she works only 3 weeks a month. So 3 weeks a month. And then she's taking like 4 months in different times off the year. And I'm just like,
cool.
And this is like 7-figure entrepreneur. She's amazing. and just
Wow.
that's her thing. So
Yeah.
We're so super, and we're surrounded by people like that too. Like, and I think more and more, Krista and I, we're always tweaking, you know, we're always like giving ourselves permission to say like, okay, like why don't we give ourselves Fridays to catch up on things that we're doing outside of the podcast, or you know, why don't we take a long weekend, you know, or give ourselves like a bit of a rest after a really intense week. And I think that's just like intuitively working and intuitively scheduling. Um, but that's always goals. What you just described is really interesting. I think that rest time in between gives you what you need in order to like create the next thing or launch the next thing, or you know, just be fully immersed in what you're creating next. So I love that. I think it definitely is heading in that direction. um, I don't know if in every industry, but I think the ones that we are in that are relatively new and always evolving, I think there's more room for that.
yeah, it can feel like perpetual launch mode, or this, you have to always be on it. And to me, it's very much linked to feminine energy and just this kind of more cyclical nature, seasons. I mean, you guys had just talked about seasons in podcasts and how they can be so beneficial to even batch content and be super strategic. I think it benefits everyone. It gives you time to get sponsors, for example, or it just allows you space in between the two seasons in a podcast space. So I'd love to see all industries actually try just more cyclical, because that is, to your point earlier, Chris, that's like back to nature also, right? Nature's not always producing in the same way. Like we're not always in summer. So I'd love to see that, and even in corporate America.
Yeah, I always feel like our audience is like, what are some tips for productivity? Like, how can I be more productive? I'm like, don't. Just like, it's like, that's the wrong question. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I've done that and I've asked that, but the problem is not like our productivity amount. It's that we're like probably pushing ourselves too much, where we're finding resistance to actually focusing on the one thing we need to do. And we're actually not taking enough breaks so that we feel energized to come back to the work that we're doing. And there's enough productivity tips in the world. Like, I feel like we're productive enough, but we're not like human enough. We're not spending enough time with ourselves. We're not spending enough time in nature. And so we can always just come back to like, it's okay if we have days where we're off, weeks where we're off, months where we're tired and we're not producing as much, we're not doing as much, because we're humans. It's like part of our experience to have ups and downs, highs and lows, energetic times, you know, non-energetic times. And we're kind of stuck in this sense of like the 9 to 5 of being like, okay, you have to be productive for these hours of the week, and then the other time you're like recovering, which doesn't feel very natural to me.
Yeah, completely. I love this theme. It's a back to nature sort of theme for everything, for business, for relationships, health. I think it's for food choices. I mean, literally everything. I think that's a powerful thought. How can we be more integrated with the nature? Interesting.
You know, as I haven't been in nature, and like I haven't been in nature really this week. So I was like wanting to cry when we were talking. I'm like,
No.
I was like, oh my God, I need it.
Well, I think and we, as you said too, though, we are nature, right? I mean, we're humans, like we're not our computers, like we are a part of nature. So it's an interesting thing. I think you're both also really strong at coming back to the breath and meditating and all of that, where it's really also presencing, because we're a part of it. Like it's not separate from that's another thing. Sometimes it feels separate. It's like, oh, I need to go for a hike in the woods and drive an hour into, you know, no cell signal, and that's being in nature. And it's my dog actually reminds me a lot that we're just, you know, he's he's so connected all the time wherever we are, and I think that's so cool. So he's somebody I try.
The
No,
best.
I love the animals. I completely agree with that one.
Yeah, I try to be more like him. People ask me like, oh, who's somebody you want to emulate? It's like, well, my dog Max.
Yeah, I love that.
He's like laying down on the floor right now, chilling. He knows how to do it. So yeah, he's good. So I think we've gone through so many different topics. I guess, is there one thing you'd want to leave people with in regards to leadership and how to evolve in the seasons of leadership.
Mhm.
I think there's that quote that's like, be the change you wish you would see in the world. And I think it's like, for me, it's like, be the leader you wish you had, because I felt like I had some great leaders when I was working in the corporate world, and I had some not so great leaders. And I just remember feeling like the ones that were great really heard me. They saw me as a person. They saw me as this like unique being that had so much going on outside of work. They respected me. They trusted me. They took chances on me. And I just feel like there's so many opportunities that we've had as leaders, both Lindsey and I, for us to like work on that, and for me to heal the ways in which I felt like I wasn't treated well as an employee, or the ways that I even as an employee didn't really treat my leader as well. So I've really enjoyed like trying out different things, doing the things that I wish would have been done, showing the same respect level that I think would have been done, and making it feel more like we can be humans at work rather than like being something else other than ourselves.
And I think, to be a great leader, I'm learning every day that if I am not taking care of myself, every part of myself, physically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally, then it will show up in in the workplace. It will show up in relationships. It will show up everywhere. So, I we both try to make that a priority. It's really, really important. And I would also just say, like, I think having hard conversations, quote unquote, hard conversations, is, I think, an art and a mark of a good leader. We're having them all the time. We are learning about how to have them all the time. And, I have found that when we're able to show up with as little ego as possible and with an open heart and as much perspective as possible, those hard conversations have always opened doors to either deeper connections, greater trust, or just more perspective on what the next best step, or more information so that we can take the next best step. So it might be easy to shy away from those hard conversations, avoid them, sweep them under the rug, maybe, like, just appease someone as to not have them. But I think they're an important part of being a leader in any realm.
Oh, so beautiful. Thank you both so much for making the time to see me today, taking
Oh, you're so
trains and
welcome.
planes. You guys are awesome. I really appreciate it.
Congratulations. So much
Yeah,
change. You're
congrats.
navigating it so well. And I'm just so proud of you for, you listened to your heart and you listened to your gut and you made hard decisions based on that. So I'm just
Hmm.
so proud to have known you. I'm proud to have you in the program. I'm proud to, be a part of your life, however you need moving forward. And thanks so much for having us.
Yeah, truly.
Oh,
Thank
thanks.
you. Thank
See ya.
Okay. Bye, ladies.
See you later.
Have a great rest of the
Bye.
day. Oh, we'll see you
Bye.
guys.
Bye.